So what is woke eugenics?
Woke eugenics is the idea, people may be familiar with a model which I've been presenting for years called the spiteful mutant hypothesis, which is that basically we have a collapse in Darwinian selection pressure where it's from the Industrial Revolution, we have 50% child mortality, and we have collapsed down to 1%. And what that means is that the things that we were selecting for in under harsh conditions, that is to say genetic physical health, genetic mental health, they correlate with other things we were selecting for, such as religiosity, which also correlates with fertility, such as conservatism, because we were under harsh group selection, and so if you're not conservative in the sense of group-oriented, then your group is destroyed, and such as ethnocentrism. And these are all instincts, as it were, that come out at times of stress, and they're adaptive, and so they all become pleiotripically related into this, essentially this fitness bundle. We call it a fitness bundle, fitness factor. And so obviously the selection has collapsed from 50% child mortality to 1% child mortality, and that means there's a huge build-up of mutation, and that build-up of mutation will be in the direction, in general, of away from what we were selecting for, i.e. Towards liberalism, towards atheism, towards xenophilia. And so we would expect all those things to be maladaptive. We would expect them to be associated with poor genetic mental health, which they are, poor genetic physical health, which they are. I mean, by the book, and you can see the numerous citations I put to this, left-wing people on average are physically shorter, their faces are more asymmetrical, they are physically weaker, they are more mentally ill, their faces are judged as less attractive, blah, 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 more left-handed, all these kinds of things. And so you would see this huge build-up of mutation in the direction of people being left-wing and atheistic and so forth. And eventually we would reach a point where the percentage of the population that were these mutants, essentially, was so high that there would be a tipping point where they would become the up-and-coming thing. And I think this happened in about probably 1963, where before then you have a conservative culture that is putting even these mutants on an adaptive roadmap of life. It's saying, men are men, women are women, pass on your genes, have children, fight for your group, all these adaptive, religiously underpinned ideas. And then eventually this tips over into being concerned with individually oriented ideas, i.e. equality. If you're at the bottom of society and you're high in mental illness, then you'll be paranoid, and you won't be able to play for status with a fight because you'll lose. So therefore you will virtue signal, and you'll virtue signal using equality, because if you're at the bottom of society you want more, and with harm avoidance, at the bottom of society you don't want harm. Those are left-wing virtues. Left-wing people are high in those, and they're low in the group-oriented foundations of in-group loyalty, of obedience to authority and sanctity. And so this is what happens. Now, my original idea was spiteful mutants, i.e. you're going to get these people that will achieve positions of prominence because they combine intelligence with high mutational load, and they will push society in a maladaptive direction and make people do maladaptive things and thus not pass on their genes. Now, there's a degree to which that's true. But then I also, myself and my colleague J.O.A. Rayner Hills, also came up with the idea, no. It's better than that. There's a white pill to this. And this is that as these people build up in their percentage of the population, and as we tip over towards then being individually oriented rather than group oriented, then you'll get a kind of runaway individualism, which starts off with being anti-racist or whatever, and then it's pro-gay, and then it's pro-transsexual and whatever, and eventually it gets to the point we are now, where people are pushed along by woke ideas on a maladaptive roadmap of life, where you're being told you should don't have children. You're being sucked into a death cult. Feel bad for being a man and become a woman and be infertile. Feel bad for being human and thus don't pass on your genes because of the climate. Feel bad for being white and thus don't pass on your genes, whatever it happens to be. And so who is going to be resistant to these maladaptive ideas? It's going to be people who are genetically resistant. It's going to be basically the pre-industrial population, i.e. the healthy population, because remember that genetic health correlates with all of these markers: religiosity, conservatism, ethnocentrism, and mental health. They all correlate into one fitness factor. So what wokeness is doing is it is sucking into its death cult all but the most genetically healthy. And therefore what it is doing, and it's crucial, it's a group level adaptation, is it's keeping the species healthy across time. It is removing the mutant genes from the gene pool, and both of humanity as a whole and of the European. Now, there's two dimensions to this. One is, if this didn't happen, what is wokeness doing? Wokeness is removing the genetically maladaptive from the gene pool, and we know that among the more intelligent, the big predictor of fertility is that you are high in the fitness factor, and the big predictor of sterility is that you're low in it. So it's doing that. The second thing it's doing is it's basically bringing down civilization. It's attacking. It's inducing intelligent people, and intelligent people tend to be highly conformist, because if you're intelligent, you can look around the world and see the way things are the dominant worldview, and you force yourself for ethical control to imbibe it, and then you competitively signal it. And so intelligent people who are high in mutational load, therefore, are also being selected out. Now, what that's doing is it's bringing down the society. It will mean that eventually the hospitals won't work, the school system won't work. All of the fruits of civilization upon which the unhealthy are reliant won't work. So you're bringing in harsher Darwinian conditions. So you're selecting out mutant genes in that way. And then once you bring that in, then you're bringing in group selection. There's going to be fights between different ethnic groups over resources. But who's going to be left among the European? It's going to be among the more intelligent. The people that survive are going to be those that are high in conservatism, high in ethnocentrism, high in religiosity, and the less intelligent, those that aren't very bright among the European, they tend to, they tend to miscegenate. So they tend to marry out of the group into the growing non-white population. So what you then end up with is an extremely intelligent and genetically healthy population that will survive the battle of group selection when that happens, which it will. And what you end up with as a whole is a humanity among all races that is more genetically healthy, and therefore will be able to survive when there's the next inevitable hit by a meteorite and civilization is completely crushed. And from a broader biological perspective, all that matters is that the species and the subspecies remain healthy across time. So you can imagine the species is rising up in numbers, it's getting unhealthier, and something has to hit in to make, if you take away Darwinian selection pressures, which we have done, something has to hit in to force it to be healthy again, or the species dies out. And what that thing is the relationship between genetic poor health and mental poor health. And what that brings about is the people with bodily poor health and mental poor health. And what that brings about is, as we get all this mutational load, the people with bodily poor health literally don't want to have children, and because they're mentally poor in health, and then they encourage those, they take over the culture in a highly pro-social species, and they encourage those that have even the remotest genetic mutational load to also not want children. And so you go back to a healthy species once again, and then presumably we just start all over again. But that is woke eugenics.